The Rubicon, starring Jeremy Winston, in 3, 2, 1.
This is the Rubicon with Jeremy Winston. It's been a while, been on hiatus, traveling with my ensemble for the month of February, but back again, just in time for Super Tuesday to talk about politics and where this election is headed. And what else can we talk about but Donald Trump and his rise to fame? So I'm going to be talking to Thomas Lawson in a little bit, who works in the California legislature and has a lot of experience with politics. But I want to first preface this discussion with one idea, and I have to say this. I don't really want to say it, but I feel like I need to. I need to say that I do not support Donald Trump's presidency. Okay, I don't think that he would be a good president, and I think that he is definitely winning on a divisive rhetoric that at times I think is highlighted and taken out of context by the media. However, he's very clever in what he's been saying, and I think that would not be good for the country. But part of me wants Donald Trump to win the Republican nomination because I think that it will be the chickens coming home to roost for the GOP, the Republican Party. For the past 7.5 years, or pretty much, let me just say plenty, during Barack Obama's presidency, the Republican Party has been running on a narrative that can be pretty much summed up with this phrase: we want to take our country back, right? We want to take our country back. That to me sounds very similar to Make America Great Again, which is Donald Trump's slogan. Donald Trump is the perfect example of a modern day Frankenstein, or the Frankenstein's monster, we should say, since we know Frankenstein was a doctor, but Frankenstein's monster. Donald Trump is a result of 7 years of talk radio driving a wedge in this nation's partisanship that really started with, I would say, in some sense, Mitch McConnell and his declaration after almost the immediate election of Obama that his goal was to make sure he was a one-term president, where the Republican Party in both the Senate and in the House have been focused on obstructionism and keeping anything that came from the desk of the president from seeing its way to legislation, which trickled down to talk radio heads like Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh and Glenn Beck and Bill O'Reilly, who have spewed these subtle phrases that they would throw their hands up in surprise when anybody would accuse them of being racist, like the phrase, "We want to take our country back." They would say, "We want to take our country back," and then people would cry, That's a call of racism and saying you want to take a country away from a black president. They said, "Oh, what are you talking about? That's not what we're saying." But now you have someone who has taken that idea by the reins and has ridden it all the way, ridden the anger and the fury and the frustration of so many people that were inspired by these talkers, and he's going to almost ride it. It looks like he may ride it all the way to be the Republican nominee. And now you see so many senators and so many congressmen coming out against Donald Trump, saying that Donald Trump should not, he would be a terrible nominee, so forth and so on, going against even their pledge. And Donald Trump is right. He said they're breaking their pledge. They told me they would be honestly full in support of me and make it a fair campaign, and they're breaking that pledge because they're scared of what it represents. But that is what they created. This is the narrative that they started a long time ago. So we're going to talk about Thomas Lawson. I want to get his perspective on it. We also want to talk about Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton and talk about this idea of socialism, democratic socialism that Bernie Sanders is pushing, and it has taken, making a lot of people excited about it. But is that something really good for America? Let's have that discussion with Thomas Lawson. This is Rubicon with Jeremy Winston.
In 49 BC, Julius Caesar led an army over the Rubicon River from Gaul into northern Italy. By doing so, he crossed the point of no return and declaration of war against the Roman Empire. Centuries later, you are listening to Jeremy Winston reach his point of no return only on Advent Sports, the Rubicon.
It's not surprising, as everyone said. I'm not surprised. But what I was disappointed, I think what was most disappointing to me was not even what was said by the students on the Yik Yak app, but what was the response from Southern Adventist University. And it was the shock, Christ calls us all to, treat one another with love. Counseling is available to the students, and they ended with a Bible verse. Okay, so the onus is on those who have been the victims of racism. The onus is once again on us to find our own healing. What is that? I'm really disappointed with Southern with that initial response. I was glad that, and I think it was in small or large part, in some part, due to the response that they got on social media, the negative response that they got to their initial statement put out, that they now have said, okay, we're going to contact the app developers, see if we can find the identities of these people, and then, some sort of disciplinary action, I suppose. But why does it take an uproar right. for that to happen? Why can't the automatic response be to make sure that people never feel comfortable acting like that? Right. There's an attitude and an atmosphere of comfort. They do it and they say these things, and I'm talking about the racists. They do it because they feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. That's just the bottom line.
The Lance J Radio Show is taped at Advent Sports Network Studios, located in beautiful Emerald City of Seattle, Washington.
Jeremy Winston with the Rubicon, and we have Thomas Lawson, who is the Director of the Office of Legislative Affairs for the Attorney General of California. Thomas Lawson actually was my first guest on the Rubicon some months ago, and happy to have you back. How you doing, Mr. Lawson?
I'm doing great, man. I'm glad to be back.
Oh, good to have you back. So listen, we're talking about Donald Trump. Today is Super Tuesday. When the listeners listen to it, Super Tuesday is going to be over. At this time, they've already called it for Donald Trump, I believe, in Alabama and in Georgia. I think they're still waiting for Texas and Virginia. So it seems to be that Donald Trump is headed to the victory that many people have been predicting and the polls are suggesting. I just talked to the audience about my idea about Donald Trump and my theory on why he's doing so well, that he is somewhat a Frankenstein or Frankensteinian result of the far right rhetoric from talk radio and so forth, and just obstructionist politics for Obama, and it has taken form in Donald Trump. I want to get your idea of that, and is this going to be the new reality for the GOP party?
Well, I think you are actually talking about something that I think is not really being addressed in the media right now. Because if you go back and if you kind of replay the tone and the things that have been said and the attack that conservative radio has had on its own party, either in Congress, even prior to that when Bush was the president, they have built up this anger. And I think there was a poll that came out tonight, I don't have the numbers, but it basically was saying that majority of the people, or the Republicans that are voting, that are supporting Donald Trump, feel betrayed by their own party. And the only reason why they feel that way is because talk radio, conservative radio, has given no quarter to any Republican for compromising or bipartisanship or actually trying to solve the problem of this country. As long as you are not taking extreme stances, you are not considered Republican. And that is, the result here is Donald Trump, someone who is saying and doing things and having a campaign that is based on kind of the real kind of, just gut reactive feelings that people have, whether or not that's actually good policy for America as a whole. I mean, this whole idea about, getting Mexico to pay for the wall. That's kind of an absurd argument. I mean, if Mexico wanted to pay for the wall, they can do it right now. They don't have to wait till Donald Trump becomes president in 2017 to do that. So it doesn't really. So these arguments, these policy arguments, aren't really holding. And to reiterate that whole point, none of his supporters really care about the policy argument. All they want is to express their anger in going against the GOP and anyone that they feel has if you will, watered down conservatism. And I think that that's a huge problem. And I think that they are reaping what you sow, if you will, in having Donald Trump as their nominee. And it'll be interesting because one of the bigger issues in politics that I think is always an issue is primaries are designed to appeal to the base voters. And it's very difficult, whether you're on the left or the right. Coming from the primary, the goal is to not get pulled so far one way or the other so that you can come back to the middle and start to talk to voters who don't vote in primaries, but they vote in general elections. So all this conversation about what Donald Trump is doing now will be very interesting, what we're going to be talking about in August, September, and October, if he is a nominee, on all the things that he said for the last year and a half.
Listen, that is absolutely right. I mean, one of the things that have really, it took me aback just listening to talk radio and how they vilified their own. I mean, I never forget when Boehner, twice Boehner was attacked from his own party and it was almost ousted as a speaker of the party prior to him actually being ousted, where him stepping down when it looked like he might not have gotten the votes. But I remember Sean Hannity on those days around that time was bringing people on and telling other congressmen that they needed to stand up for true conservative rights and so forth, and really just pushing congressmen and women to boycott, or I guess have a coup and get Boehner out of there. And when Boehner finally did step down, I'll never forget Sean Hannity mocked him on the radio and called him a crybaby because people may remember when the Pope was in town and he was on the ledge with the Pope. He cried a lot. Remember that?
Boehner was a crier. That was
he was a crier. He was a crier. But Sean Hannity mocked him, and I remember thinking, like, do you really want to do this to your own party? I mean, there's so many people on the left that consider Boehner just as much of an obstructionist as any other Republican. I mean, Sean Hannity attacks Mitch McConnell, the leader of the Senate for the Republican Party, and Mitch McConnell said from day one that he wanted to make sure that Obama was a one-term president. So it seems to me that no matter what people say, if there is any inkling of support on any level of Obama or any legislation, no matter what the legislation was, that they've been attacked. And this is the result. And even now, Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh and these guys, they cannot bring themselves to speak against Trump. I mean, they're supporting him all the way through, and I think they have to, because this is what they created. And so I want to ask you this. So my statement in the last part was, part of me wants to see Trump be the nominee and I didn't get into this, so America can make a statement once and for all how they feel about this extremist politics. I think, Eric Brooks said, the conservative commentator for the New York Times and writer for the New York Times, said that he's going to, in light of what's going on, he's going to miss Obama's pragmatism and even, kind of even character. And he's a conservative. The benefit that could come out of this is that America can see what the extreme conservative can become, and they can make a decision once and for all if they will support it or not. I mean, does that seem like a viable? Or is that too much to ask? You think of?
I love America. I think America is one of the greatest countries in the world. My problem, though, with that theory is it's playing with too much fire, because we are putting a lot of trust that people are going to be able to make a intellectual decision versus an emotional decision. One thing, whether you like him or not, one thing that Donald Trump is really good at, he's really good at using, because he's an entertainer, the media to his advantage, even when he says something crazy. And so the question is, if the majority of folks are not going to these websites and triple checking and double checking on what these folks are saying, policies, and whether or not they actually agree with them or not. And all they're doing is watching MSNBC, Fox News, CNN. Mm-hmm. You don't really get a full sense of the toxic nature of what Donald Trump is doing right now. So I don't want him to be the nominee because I don't want to put all my eggs in that basket that then America is going to say, okay, now it's our turn to make the right decision, because a lot of people are voting right now. He's going to all these states, and whether you're paying attention or not paying attention, it's almost impossible to not know right now that Donald Trump is not running for president of the United States, and that something has been going on. So the fact that no one has really been able to, kind of knock him off of his path, to me is a huge deal and a problem, and I'm uncomfortable with him being the nominee because he's one election away from sitting in the White House, and to me that's too close.
Right. Well, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. I tell you one statistic that did scare me a little, and you brought it up about the numbers. The last primary, I believe, was in South Carolina, and there were Trump got approximately. And someone's going to go double check me, but I'm pretty sure I'm in the ballpark. 110,000 votes in South Carolina.
Yeah.
For the Democratic primary, which was in Nevada around the same time, between Hillary and Sanders, they got a combined 10,000 votes.
Right.
So it suggests to me that there is like you said, there's a number of individuals who are coming out and voting in the GOP primary that far outnumbers the number of people who are coming out for the Democratic primary. Is that a statement of what will come? I don't know. I mean, it doesn't mean that those who vote more left or Democratic are going to stay home, but it does show that there is an enthusiasm that is somewhat an opposite or antithesis to what was the enthusiasm for Obama, and it seems to be starting early.
Yeah, I think that I can go off of what I've been working in politics in California for about 10 years now, and one thing that has been true and has run through every election is that Republicans turn out in primaries. That's one thing that they're really, really good at, and Democrats are much better at turning out during the general election. Now, it's always an issue because you have that same dynamic where, especially in competitive seats where you have, Democrats and Republicans, with an even registration advantage. And in the primary, the Republican gets, 2-1 votes on the Democrat, and people start freaking out. This person going to be able to win. But then, the Democrat ends up winning, by, eking it out sometimes or winning by 1 or 2 points in the general election. So I think that to me, that's always run true. I think the difference is, and the problem that we have is that our last major 2 elections had Obama as the candidate, and he, to me, was a very rare case in the sense that I think he had all the tools necessary to engage folks, to inspire folks, but also get them to be pragmatic and understand what needed to be done. I don't think that we're ever going to get that type of politician again. And I love the fact that history always kind of looks back and really shows you kind of the impact of what people did. And we really won't know the impact and what we had in Obama until we're 2, 3, 4 presidents away from now. Because I think what we're seeing and what we've experienced is something very rare. So I don't think that Bernie Sanders is that person. I don't think Hillary Clinton's that person. And so I don't think that they're going to be able to inspire folks in the way that he can, which is going to automatically do things, which is, have Democrats pour out in a primary that's not necessarily historically accurate. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest issues that people don't recognize is Obama was a rare candidate, and that's also why he was able to win 2 terms as president of the United States.
Right. Well, listen, this is a very interesting time politically, and it's hard to believe that, I literally almost have to pinch myself when I hear how divided the GOP party is in this situation, and that we could literally have a candidate who would be the GOP nominee who is for many years been considered a Democrat on so many levels, but anyway. So, I mean, that's a whole nother topic. We can go back to the history of Donald Trump and everything, which is quite an amazing turnaround. But we want to move on. We're going to take a brief break. This is Jeremy Winston talking to Thomas Lawson. He was the director of the Office of Legislative Affairs for the Attorney General of California. And this is the Rubicon. We're going to take a brief second.
You are listening to Advent Sports Network, your exclusive home for South Central Conference basketball and the Lance J Radio Show.
We're back with Jeremy Winston on the Rubicon, and we're talking to Thomas Lawson, who is the director of the Office of Legislative Affairs for the Attorney General of California. And we're talking politics. Last segment, we talked about Donald Trump and the Republican and the GOP, and there's so much more we could have gotten into, but for time's sake, we're going to have to move on and go to the other side and talk about the Democrats. And one thing that I've been having discussions with and just considering very intensely is this idea of democratic socialism, because Bernie Sanders has really gotten a groundswell of support. So many Robert Reich has come out in support of him. So many people in the African American community are excited about him, and he's just really electrifying people with his talk on definitely campaign finance reform, which I agree with wholeheartedly, and him not taking any dollars from major donors and so forth and so on. But one thing that has kind of I just be honest, I'm not certain on how I feel about it completely, is this idea of just generally democratic socialism. One thing that he says that he would want to have happen is free health care for everyone and moving to a single payer system. Now, I understand that, but I have not yet been able to put my head around how this would, number one, how it would work, and if it could work financially for the country. And so I wanted to get your thoughts on this and on democratic socialism and specifically on the idea of single payer system and healthcare for all.
Well, first I want to say that the Democrats are better off having Bernie and Hillary run in this primary. I think that they are both raising issues that need to be talked about within our party to get us to understand kind of what is going to be our pillars going to the general election. I do not think that having no challenge in a primary is a good thing, because I just don't think that it moves the conversation. So I think that having Bernie is a good thing. I will say, though, that one of my problems that I have with some of the things that Bernie Sanders is saying is I'm at a loss on how he expects to get some of that done. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I have is that Bernie Sanders was a United States Senator during the passage of Obamacare. He sat in on those hearings, he sat in on those votes, and he had to have understood kind of what was going on the other side. And some of the disconnect I have is with campaigning and governing. They're two different things. So, but he also has a lot of experience. He's almost been in office for 3 decades, if I'm not mistaken, almost 3 decades. He has to know that there's no way with the current makeup of Congress and the Senate and in House of Representatives that a single-payer health care bill would get introduced, voted on, and sent to the president, no matter who the president was. Right. So to me, I'm trying to figure out if he knows that, because he experienced Obamacare and how difficult it was to get that, in many progressives' eyes, that watered-down version, if you will, of single-payer through and becoming law. How does he expect it and turn around and tell folks that we're going to double down and go with a more extreme version of that bill? I have a hard time understanding the thought process in that regard, because to me it just doesn't add up. And so to me it starts to get into this point where you're telling people things that they want to hear because it sounds like it's the right thing to do, but you also have to figure out a way, I think, to explain a plan. And I haven't really heard that plan based on today's political reality. So I think, quote unquote, the democratic socialism is appropriate in that it's getting Democrats to really decide on what they want to be. But I also think it's very important to think about what we can accomplish. And some people think that that's a wrong thing to do. You should just vote for the person you love and not worry about whether or not they're going to get anything done. But if Bernie Sanders becomes president and he doesn't give free tuition and he doesn't pass single payer and he doesn't change campaign finance reform, then what?
Right.
That's my question.
I mean, and that brings up a great point because, I mean, you think about it, again, going back to your point about Obamacare had both the House and the Senate. I mean, the Democrats were the majority in both of those chambers, and he barely got Obamacare across. I mean, limping. I mean, he negotiated. He gave away the store. I mean, we all know about the Louisiana Purchase and all that stuff, you know, with that, and it was pretty grueling when you look at when you read about what he had to deal just to get Obamacare passed. And so in order for even that to be a consideration, like you're saying, they would have to win back the Senate, right, and the House to even get anything done. Because Paul Ryan, he's going to be the Speaker. I mean, if they keep the majority in the House, which they probably will, he's going to be the Speaker, and I don't see how he lets anything like that get to the floor. But also another thing, you're saying he is Trump for the Democrats, right? Because in some sense, Trump talking about getting Mexico to build a wall, right? And I remember Mexico, the president of Mexico, they had some choice words for Trump, and Trump said, right, he did, and Trump said that he just added 6 more feet to the wall, right? Which to me is hilarious. I mean, listen. I know the conversation is gravitating back to Trump, and I apologize to my listeners for that. But Trump has got some pretty timely comebacks, man. I mean, when Bush was saying how, you know, he said, my mother's, you know, she's a great, strong woman, and Trump said she should run. I mean, his comebacks were really well timed. But anyway, so it's almost as pie in the sky as Mexico building a wall. And it could, in some sense, to say that he's going to be able to get a bill through Congress that's going to create a single-payer system for America.
I
is
agree.
That fair, or is that too extreme? I mean, people are going to be throwing things at the radio for me, or the computer for me saying that. But I mean, is that really that off base?
I think so. I think it's absolutely right, and I'm going to catch flack for saying that. But for whatever reason, we can't see that that's just as extreme. If you know that what you're saying you can't do, why are you saying it?
Right.
Because I understand the political realities of it. And Bernie Sanders was on the committee that helped negotiate Obamacare. He knew what they had to give away in order to get that passed. And so this man is now telling me that because he is now going to move from, Congress to Pennsylvania Avenue, that he's now all of a sudden going to be able to pass a more extreme version. That doesn't make any sense. And the rise of Donald Trump is also having an effect on down-ballot races, which means that Congress could possibly get more conservative.
Right. Right, because if Donald Trump is driving the party way to the right, so even someone moderate to Donald Trump is a Ted Cruz or Rubio. I mean, these guys seem moderate compared to Trump, and I mean, Ted Cruz is probably right next to Trump, but still, I mean, Trump is going way to the right, and it's amazing, how polarized the parties have become, because both parties have gone further to their respective sides. So Hillary Clinton, let's close out just talking about Hillary Clinton. Is she in trouble? I mean, is she going to be able to pull through this? Because I know she just won Nevada, which was a big deal. They said that she's 10 points ahead now. It looks like she may be beginning to pull away, which I think a lot of people are expecting. But, there's still a lot of endorsements coming for Bernie Sanders, a lot of just powerful moving things on Facebook, social media. He seems to be still having a lot of momentum. Is Hillary out the woods, or do you think she's still in trouble?
She's still in trouble, I think. I mean, when you have, on the opposite side, when we talk about, Bernie Sanders, almost 3 decades in Congress, Hillary Clinton has been in the political, minds of everyone for the last, 20, 30 years as well. And she has baggage, and her trustworthy issue, I think, is going to be a really, really big anchor for her. And she's got to figure out a way to overcome that. Not with the Democrats that vote in primaries, but with the independents and the folks that just show up for the general. She's really going to have to convince them that she is trustworthy and that she will, protect the office of the presidency. I mean, that's the other issue. Her husband's legacy is that he damaged the office of the presidency by the things that he did and said and his actions during that time. She is already starting off with a negative, negative marks, if you will, because she's had a lot of controversy around things she's doing, things she's done as Secretary of State, the whole email issue, which is still, unsolved. She's under investigation. So I think she still has a long road to convince folks that because she's experienced doesn't mean she should be president. She needs to convince folks on why she will protect the office of the president and she is worthy of their vote. And she still has some work to do in that regard.
Awesome. Thomas Lawson, Director of the Office of Legislative Affairs for the Attorney General of California. Thanks so much for being on. We will do it much more as this election season begins to heat up.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
The Rubicon is an ASN Talk Radio expansion franchise about current events, news, and geopolitics. All footage is taped in Dayton, Ohio, and produced at Advent Sports Network's downtown studios in the lovely Emerald City of Seattle, Washington.